Welcome to the Report, where we watch and talk about every episode of the Colbert Report from 2005 to 2014. That's a lot of episodes. I'm Alex,
And I'm Nathaniel.
and Colbert's guest is Eliot Spitzer.
Introduction.
Introduction, he talks about France having a revolution, but it's not a musical like Les Mis. Colbert in Canada said he's a fair trade for Neil Young. Yeah,
And he has New York Attorney
talks about
General
Eliot Spitzer.
Eliot Spitzer on.
Yeah, he would not become governor yet, as he had just announced he was running.
Yep.
I do as governor.
Next segment is riding do's and don'ts because of the protests in France and Argentina.
Yeah, the protests in France apparently were about the police in Paris had chased youth into a substation where they were electrocuted.
Oh.
I don't know if it was a racial thing like the more recent riots they had in France, but it does seem kind of funny that it just seems like all the protests will escalate to riot level, and it doesn't seem like they have too much of an issue with it, given that it keeps happening.
It's a French tradition at this
Yeah,
point.
I mean, it pretty much is. I mean, they do probably think of it as an extension of the French Revolution, so.
Now, those mostly just happen in Paris, though,
I
right?
think so. I mean, they might have like some of the ones in the other cities, but
But would French people from other cities consider that like a Parisian thing?
I don't know. They might consider it worse in Paris, I would
Like,
imagine.
would they make fun of people from Paris for it?
Maybe, I don't know. I imagine they probably have cultural grievances with Paris and a lot of
Yeah.
things. So he says he wants to congratulate the French on what sporting event did they win.
Had they won any sporting event at that time?
I think the World Cup wasn't that long ago,
Did they
so.
win the World Cup that year?
I mean, not in 2005.
I don't believe they won the 2002 World Cup or the 2006 one either.
France World Cup
Wins,
wins. They won in 1998, which I mean was like 7 years ago. So
but probably not what they're. Well, maybe they would still be celebrating it.
maybe. You said you're not a real fan until you're crushed to death against defense.
Hmm.
Does he think given that they has had the Hillsborough thing in the UK,
Yeah,
in Liverpool, but I'm not. I mean, I doubt that specifically.
I mean the being a fan in Europe is it's a different affair.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing somebody on Twitter recently saying I went to America and I was actually worried that somebody would attack me if I was wearing the wrong team's colors.
Don't worry about that.
Yeah,
I'm
probably
sure
not.
most European sports fans are reasonable.
Like even
It's
if you maybe wearing a Yankees cap in Boston or something, but even then, like
Yeah, but I mean, not in like downtown Boston or anything like the touristy
probably not.
areas.
He also mentioned, and there talks about Argentina protests. He did mention what those were for. It was because they're having the summit of the Americas at the time.
And Bush was invited.
Yeah, so I imagine a lot of like more anti-American Latin American types were not that happy about that. So.
Okay, so they decided to write about it. Is there
Protest,
was a
a
protest, not a
protest.
riot?
I don't know.
Is,
Probably a bit of both. It's hard
okay.
to say.
Is there like a something about the French like police system that
I'm
leads
not
to
sure.
like more riots, or is it?
Maybe. There also has riots in Brussels and Berlin, but it seems like those are just rumored copycats of the French ones. It doesn't seem
Mm.
like they ever actually became a thing.
How does a rumor about a riot spread? I feel like
Like
it's more.
people just, I mean, I imagine there's probably a bit less video being shared, so it wasn't like
Okay, but they get to like the planning phase and they don't.
I don't know, maybe.
They just stay
Yeah.
home.
And so it gets into the do's and don'ts before making a quick quiet riot joke. The
Yeah.
band. Do is smash windows, has created an explosion of sparkles as it
Hmm.
was it, and do burn cars. He says, I mean, the glass will shatter when it's hot enough, so that's
Yeah.
2 for 1. And he tries to think of don'ts, but he can't think of
No
any.
don'ts for riot.
Then he says that riding should be done out of joy and rage. Rage is the angry joy. Now, you said you felt like he could have made a joke about how like breaking windows would be good for the economy of fixing
Yeah, I
windows.
really thought that. To me, that seemed almost the obvious angle for
Yeah,
when made that joke. Maybe they didn't want to go for
I
the
do wonder if
obvious.
Colbert's character would say that now. But I mean, like, I feel like even nowadays, like, you can't condemn all riots because then you would have to condemn storming the Capitol and, like, Black Lives Matter
Yeah,
or whatever. So,
I think this is almost not a in character joke. It's just
and I
funny.
feel like Colbert just takes unreasonable positions because he can a
Yeah,
lot.
that's the joke. Is the
Yeah. And then Colbert starts speaking French.
French is
First, he
not
has, like,
very good.
nursery rhymes, but then he says that he tries to tell them that the real enemies are the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
That'll end well.
Was it the Adamun? Or
Yeah.
yeah.
Allemand.
Mm.
Yes.
The French is not very
And
good also.
then the word.
The word is Hoser.
Hoser. Like the Canadian thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to say it in an
Yeah,
accent, you know, like
because as I mentioned before, the Colbert Report was coming out in Canada, and I didn't know that there was the Rick Mercer Report, which was sort of like Colbert, and I assumed it was after, but it was actually a year before.
So it's one of those like Heathcliff and
I don't know, maybe. I imagine it was probably. It is kind of funny that it's also called The Report, so
yeah,
I wonder if that did get him a little bit suspicious. But I mean, it seems like it was probably more based on The Daily Show, I imagine, at the time. So,
which the
but then
Colbert
again, that
Report is also
also,
based on.
but also Rick Mercer came just like Colbert came on a pre-existing show. This hour is 22 minutes or 23 minutes. I forgot the exact.
How
And
long?
that one had been airing even before The Daily Show,
Yeah,
so
well,
maybe it was both of them were
what's the like Oreo? That's not an Oreo.
Hydrox.
Hydrox.
But I mean,
That's
I
right.
feel like Oreo, the consensus is that it was based on Hydrox, and I feel
Yeah.
like this was probably
Is
just,
there a reason Hydrox sounds like medicine?
I don't know, maybe that's part of the reason it didn't stick around as well.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
know that Colbert actually later makes a joke that it sounds like Clorox. He says, all my favorite candy is Oreos, Hydrox, Clorox.
yeah. Mark this down for when we get to that
I
episode.
mean, I'm not sure if we'll remember or if we'll get to that
Well, if
episode.
we mark it down, we might
Yeah.
remember.
He said, call his kid our pale sister to the north, and then the bullet point says, why can't she find a guy? I feel like it could be like some sort of like the Canadian girlfriend that you never see kind of joke.
Yeah,
And this is to those not in Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver, this is called a television.
yeah.
Eh,
Bilingual. I am
then
Stephen Colbert.
yeah,
I have balls.
yeah, he starts speaking English and the words in French so that he can like
Yeah.
have a bilingual introduction. Grand testicule is how it's.
Is that actually how you'd
I
say?
mean, I assume it's right, although it probably wouldn't be the literal translation you would
Yeah.
use. And to make sure that Canada gets it, it being
Mm-hmm.
him. He mentions his problems with Canada in the past. The bullet point is the $2 coin
Mm.
and references every part's on notice except for none of it.
Because the name is cool.
Yeah. Then he brings up the software thing again, which I said
Mm.
was a real thing, as I mentioned before. So I am curious how they found out about it. Like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it was big enough that like it was one of the big issues between the countries, but it is. So
They probably looked up something about
yeah.
Canada.
And of course, it does come up as pretty funny because it does sound like one of the things that the Canadians would think they could pressure the Americans on because, like, they're Canada.
But I don't think the
Yeah.
Americans really cared.
Like, it has Prime Minister Paul Martin. It seems I didn't really know the Prime Minister for 3 years. It seems like the idea was just like Chrétien's government was falling apart, so he replaced
Who
it.
came before Paul
It
Martin?
was Jean Chrétien. He's also
Mm.
part of the Liberal Party. And
Okay.
because like his government was falling apart, the Liberals replaced him with Paul Martin. But
Yeah.
I think he might have won like the step election before that. I forget, but he did lose an election to Harper not that long after that. So
Who is the one who came to America? Oh, that's during the Vietnam War, not the Iraq War. Because I remember, because it wasn't there
I
present.
think that would have been. I think that might have been true. That could have been Trudeau, honestly. But, oh, I think you're thinking of Pearson because
Yeah,
Pearson went to LBJ's ranch, and that was a kind of a funny
yeah.
experience.
I remember.
You pissed on my rug. Apparently, is what LBJ said.
Did LBJ talk with a Southern accent?
I assume he talked with some sort of a Texas accent.
Yeah,
I don't remember
that
him.
makes him scarier, even.
Maybe. And of course, it quotes Paul Martin saying, "Forgive my departure from diplomatic decorum" or something like that, but this is nonsense. A speech before the Economic Club of New York. I mean, I
Yeah,
probably could have found a recording of that. I'm not, because I mean, I couldn't find the text, so maybe it was just a recording.
yeah.
Is thank God you people don't have the bomb. I would be really scared.
They might.
I can't tell if the idea is Colbert's character is being sarcastic in character or if his character is just dumb enough to be scared. Like, I mean, both
I,
might work.
I think it's the character being sarcastic in context,
But yeah,
but it's funny either
he's got to
way.
reconsider his Molson embargo. What was it, Scuggy?
What's the Molson embargo?
Molson is a kind of Canadian beer.
Oh,
I know Canadians often tried to brag that their beer was better than American beer
mm.
because I think they measured the alcohol content differently.
So that's what makes the beer better.
I'm not sure if it actually does make it better. It just makes them think that it is or something.
Yeah,
He says at least Canada's better than France because I mean France is not only the riots but the freedom prize thing is still probably a big deal.
but they
But
still do have French
yeah,
people in
and then he
Canada.
compliments Canada for generously letting all half of their gun-related crimes be committed with American guns.
Does America actually make most of our own guns?
I think so.
We don't outsource that to like
I
China
mean, we
or
might for some parts, but I think
yeah.
probably the final assembly. I mean, that seems like it would be a big vulnerability.
Yeah, what are guns are mostly made of metals, right?
I assume.
Which metals?
I don't know the exact
Like they're
metals.
not making plastic guns.
I mean, some parts are made of plastic. I mean, there was the 3D printed gun, but I think that's only partially made out of the 3D printed material. Like you would need to make the barrel yourself. I think.
Okay.
So he says Daniel, who is writer Jay Katzer, who would later come back as Jay the intern. Boy, I hope somebody got fired for that continuity slip up, I guess, to become the citizen.
Well, maybe he went to Canada and then his identity got
Maybe.
lost and he came back to the show.
I mean, it is kind of interesting. Like, I would have expected him to be been a replacement by a new guy, but he was somebody that was there from the start. They just had him play the role that Bobby was playing.
Did he actually get Canadian citizenship ever?
I mean, he
Doubt
might
it.
actually be Canadian. I didn't.
Because they do have the picture of him, like,
Yeah,
shaking
shaking
somebody's
his
hand.
hands with the security guards. He looks like the security guard is apparently important in Canada. And then he brings back drugs for Colbert because, I mean, prescription drugs are cheaper in Canada.
Ugh.
Because the brings up is codeine, Vicodin, and Tamiflu. I assume the last is because Tamiflu is not a narcotic as far as I can tell. It's just a flu medication.
Yeah,
And he couldn't find him OxyContin though. So
yeah.
if you
And
were wondering what "in" means, it's just like from "in,"
and
which is just the Latin adjectival
is that for all
suffix.
drugs that end with "in" or just like OxyContin?
I mean, like in general, the reason why they.
Okay. And is that at all related to the reason that?
Oh, I mean, Cotton though is because I'm pretty sure it's short for continue.
Oh,
Because the idea was they would have a slow release. Like there was another drug that they made called MS Cotton, and then they made OxyContin from
hmm.
oxycodone.
Is it in any way related to the enzymes that they always end in?
Yeah, I mean that's from the Latin suffix.
So it's just they. But do the drugs that end in usually have anything to do with
I mean, I think
enzymes?
they're often. I think with drug names, sometimes they're just based on the chemical name, and the thing is, oftentimes even the chemical name is a shortening of like a
Mm.
full name. I mean, like sometimes even in different countries, like the U.S. shortens it to acetaminophen, what the U.K. shortens to paracetamol.
Oh, so they just pick different parts of the name
Yeah.
for that.
The next one is the
For a nap.
which is like the freedom snap is what
Yeah.
it's and it's your country's so ugly it has to put a paper bag over a topographic map.
Yep. I think I'll be sad whenever the freedom
Yeah,
something
it's definitely
sections go
gonna go.
away.
I don't remember that.
Which is sad because they're funny.
Then going on to the next.
Threat down.
Pull your covers over your head, he says, if you were going to sleep.
Yep.
Number 5,
Pirates.
pirates. As the pirates have been weekend into selling cheese puffs and getting you into art school. I find the art school thing funny because like it was a reference to this thing called the art instruction schools that would put out these magazine ads saying draw one of these 3 things and we'll consider if you're a good enough artist to get into our school.
And was one of them
Yeah,
pirates?
one of them was a picture of a pirate. The other one was a picture of a turtle. That's the one that I had seen come up. But like,
Mm.
the thing is, I only know about it because it's referenced on like Colbert and The Daily Show. Like, this is way before my time, mostly. But
Did
like,
Colbert consider applying to art school?
I don't know. But
Did like writers of
yeah, I
the
assume it
shows
must have been just a fairly ubiquitous thing when
like for
the writers
people?
were younger. Like,
Yeah.
imagine like most like kids magazines must have had like ads like that.
Did the art instruction schools actually ever
I'm
look at
not sure if
those?
I mean I don't know.
Or was the art instruction school even a real thing?
I mean, I think it was kind of a real thing, but I am wondering how they prevent people from tracing it. Like, did they have to have you draw it a different size or something?
Well, maybe if it looked the exact same, they wouldn't
Maybe, but I mean, I feel like there's simple
accept you.
enough drawings that you could do it pretty similar if you were good.
Yeah. Well, then you'd be a very good cheater, which probably passed the school
Yeah,
anyway.
I mean, plenty of comics artists have gotten a career by tracing other people's work. So,
Yeah.
well, maybe not plenty, but a lot of them.
Ripped into headlines from mid '90s.
Steven Seagal movie because Under Siege, the plot of that Steven Seagal movie was a ship got attacked. Pointing out
Mm.
after Die Hard, there are pretty much a lot of movies where just X location gets attacked by terrorists who take people hostage.
Was that after? That was before 9/11 too.
Yeah, it was before 9/11. I feel like it's possible 9/11 probably changed how a lot of action movies had to be so that they weren't like too.
Yeah, but the terrorists were definitely in the.
I mean, terrorists were big. Like, it wasn't that much of a surprise that there was a terrorist attack.
Was that because the Soviets were gone?
I mean, imagine that's a lot of it was that terrorists were not the biggest threat.
Yeah. Cruise ship to Kenya
Yeah, it
was
was a cruise ship to
attacked.
Kenya was attacked, like in the Somalian waters. It was on November 6th, so like it was a pretty new story at the time. By the Seaborn Spear, the Seaborn Spear was the name of the ship.
Yeah.
And then he says, "We're now worried that the pirates could ruin their shrimp buffets."
When did the South Park episode about Somali
That
pirates
was in
come out?
2009. After there was the one bear ship or
Mm.
whatever that got seized by the pirates, and that was a pretty big deal. That was when Captain Phillips
Yeah.
movie was based on that.
So, like, when did it enter the public conscious that there were pirates in
I'm not
Somalia?
sure. I mean, I imagine it was not didn't take that long because I mean it makes sense. It was an unstable region and it was
Yeah.
close to a major shipping lane. So
But now when you think of Somalia, you almost think of pirates. But I
yeah,
bet for somebody in like in the even in the '90s, if you said Somalia, would people not think of
I'm
pirates?
not sure. I mean, maybe they think about like the Black Hawk Down incident
Yeah.
instead. The next one is about Canadian optometrist is threat number 4, and it has a picture of an eye chart with A on the top, which
Yeah.
I bet they thought they were pretty clever. They came up with that one.
Where does that image come from? Was it stock photo
I
or?
assume it was just a stock photo they edited.
It's
Yeah.
a funny stock
I
photo.
said that was a good idea. And it was George Smitherman, who was the Ontario health minister at the time, called the optometrists terrorists because the health insurance said that they would not cover like all optometry exams in the province, and so the optometrists complained about it.
Mm.
I think like they threatened to like not do anything.
Optometrists. What a threat to
Yeah,
society.
he was a liberal, so it wasn't like he was that gung ho on the cutting, I imagine. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it said he did become deputy premier for a little bit later.
What actually happened to the optometrists?
I'm not sure. I didn't look that far in, but he did apologize later. I mean, of course he did.
Mm-hmm.
And like apparently, when he was asked about what Colbert said about him, he said he wasn't concerned about him. It says, "I mean, optometrists are a sick bunch of people that get kicks from blowing air in our eyeballs." And the Radio City musicians went on strike. That's threat number 3. It started on November 3rd, and it was settled by November 18th.
Still 15 days.
But the Christmas Spectacular was a doubt. And of course,
Oh.
Colbert makes this part of the war on Christmas. I think this might be the first time he brought that up, even though that was a pretty big topic of news at the time. So,
Yeah. So, is Radio City based in New York?
yeah, the Radio City Music Hall is there. They have like the Rockettes and things like that.
Okay. And then number 2 is
NASCAR
NASCAR
romance
romance
novels.
novels.
They were partnering with Harlequin, the famous romance novels publisher, to release novels like Into the Groove and Dangerous Curves. And I looked it up. This full series has 40 books.
Are those actual titles of the books?
I'm pretty sure.
Wow. Oh, I thought Colbert was making those up.
I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that the real titles can't be
Any
any
better?
better.
Let's look at some of the
Yeah, they're
titles.
real, and the groove is real. The other
Okay.
ones include Back on
On the
Track,
track.
Hearts
Hearts
Under
under
Caution,
caution.
Checkered
Checkered
Past,
past.
Speed
Speed
Dating,
dating.
From
From
the
the outside.
Outside, Danger
Zone.
Zone,
Thunderstruck.
Thunderstruck,
And that's
among others.
wow.
And it says, it's one of the final frontiers of male bonding. You can damage this. We won't drive race cars through your meadows of flowers, and we won't put. So if you don't put Fabio in a fire suit, Fabio, of
So
course, being the famous romance novel cover model, in case the people at home don't know.
so how are they received, the romance novels?
I don't know. I haven't checked. On Goodreads, they're getting like 3.5 ish ratings, so like probably average.
Well, to be fair, I feel like it's kind of a small market, people
I
who like
imagine it
romance
is.
novels and
But I
NASCAR.
imagine that romance novel writers might just maybe don't put as much effort into them if they could write them that fast.
Yeah, how do you write a romance novel that fast? You just
I
copy
don't
and paste.
know.
I wouldn't be surprised if many romance novels were copy and pasted with
Probably
like adjectives
something
changed.
like that. And number 1, of course, is Bears.
Bears.
And this one really fell into the lap because people started looking into Scooter Libby's novel that he wrote back in 1996.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently enough that in December the publisher actually started reprinting it because
Yeah.
and it takes place in Japan in like 1903 and it features a scene where a prostitute is raped by a bear for like to get money for like the
Mm-hmm.
brothel or something. It
Yeah.
was very odd that he thought of that. I think Scooter Libby gave an explanation, but I can't
And
recall
what
that
did
one.
that was like? Was it a history book? Was it a novel?
It was a novel.
It was a
I
novel.
said, Scooter Libby is certainly guilty of creeping me out.
Yeah. So was Scooter Libby like an author, like a novelist before?
I imagine he just like casually wrote like a lot of these people will just write novels in their spare time. Like
Okay. And I guess that's what,
that's it
fourth
for
time with bears
I don't know.
as a
I don't
threat.
think it's the fourth, but
It's there's been bears every threat down.
yeah,
So
except for the first one.
yeah.
On to
Scooter Eliot Spitzer
Eliot
interview.
Spitzer interview.
Yeah.
Of course, this is definitely one of the ones that's fine. That's kind of odd in context because
Mm-hmm.
what I'd mainly known Eliot Spitzer for was that he was forced to resign after it was discovered that he'd like spent his like state salary on prostitutes and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting to see him before all that. Like, he would come back to Colbert even after the scandal, like when he was running again. He's also on the final show.
Is that part of his image
I don't know.
retool? I feel like Colbert's not the best show to go on if you want to look good.
I'm not sure if he's tried that
So
hard.
he's on the final show. They invited him back.
It was on like he was one of many. Like
Mm.
they were all singing along.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, I know
Yeah, Neil
was
deGrasse Tyson is there. Stone
yeah,
Phillips was there, of course. Like you couldn't have like the first person on the.
yeah.
Okay, he starts out by saying this guy's all right, even though he doesn't care for politicians or lawyers. He says, "Can I call you Mister A Attorney General or your Attorney Generalness?"
Is there an actual title for just Mister?
I mean, there probably is a title you're supposed to call them. Like, I know one of the funny facts I heard is that for like some offices in Canada, like mayors, the official title is Your Worship. Because kind of like the Rob Ford thing happened. That was
Yeah, that's is
pretty
that
funny.
assume that's a British relic, right?
Probably, yeah. And
Just
said he was running for governor. The current governor was the Republican George Pataki, so it actually
yeah.
would have been a big kind of change.
Was it a swing race? Like, what is
I'm
it?
not. I forget how close it was. I'm given that how popular he seemed, it probably imagine he probably and that 2006 was a good year for the Democrats.
Yeah.
I imagine he probably didn't have that hard of a time. And then he says that in his audience, none of them will actually vote, and said most of them live in Canada. And there
Hmm.
is one guy hooting, so imagine he actually is
Yeah, and he
Canadian.
hoots later on too whenever they mention Canada. So he's
Yeah.
he's probably actually Canadian.
He mentions that Eliot Spitzer has 61% approval and that he could punch a toddler and still, which I mean, I said, does this at all? Another thing that does seem kind of funny now.
Yeah.
I said he's going to take names for the other 39%.
Yeah, Eliot Spitzer handles the questions for like I think compared to the Better Know District people, he's kind of
I mean, he's actually prepared. Like he knows what
yeah.
he's getting into, and like,
Yeah, he feels best prepared for a Colbert interview compared to the rest of them.
yeah,
Although it seems like for him it's more of a campaign thing. Like he
yeah,
actually is trying to promote himself out of it. And I think he does as good a job as you can on Colbert
yeah.
to
I
do
mean,
that.
it's not like Colbert is going to give him any hard questions.
No.
And so he says, once you go after the Wall Street insurance people, who's going to be left to contribute? It shouldn't be who's next; it should be who's left.
Yeah.
But of course, he just says, I mean, many people that are victims and they're going to support me, which, yeah,
Yeah.
that's how it works. And then he wonders, like, are they just cutting checks to get you out of the attorney general's office so you stop prosecuting them?
And he did say that was an actual thing that
I mean, he brings
happened.
up the story that it seems like part of the reason that, like, Theodore Roosevelt became the vice presidential nominee is that the party people in New York that didn't like him thought it would be an easy way to get rid of him.
That did not work.
Yeah. I mean, too, for but put out, I mean, it was pretty rare for the vice president to run for office after that.
Yeah.
So,
But Teddy Roosevelt was not most vice presidents,
and also McKinley
clearly.
was shot.
Yeah.
He says that he likes TR. He calls him TR, as they say,
Yeah.
and
As he knows
he
him
because he
personally.
understood the bear threat, he
Yeah.
can't stop bringing up the bears, I guess.
It's
Because I
a
mean that is his thing.
it's part of the
They
show.
says Spitzer says he hunts for bears in Central Park all the time.
Yeah.
No bulls as they're down on Wall Street. Well, I mean not for long as once the market went bad. He talks about how much money you have to run for governor, how much scratch.
A lot of money,
Yes,
apparently.
it's $4 to $5 million, which I'm pretty sure is a lot smaller than like what would be spent on Obama's campaign later.
Yeah. Well, Spitzer says that was used to be presidential money.
Yeah,
When was 2020 the most expensive presidential campaigns?
I'm not sure.
What about
I'm
adjusted for inflation?
Maybe I didn't check. Then he says that like the amount of money was almost obscene, and he says it's not. It's just merely pornographic. That says again, kind of funny considering
Yeah.
what happened.
Although Eliot Spitzer says it's only merely obscene because he's running. So
Yeah,
at least it's some self-awareness about the whole donation thing.
and to further the things that'll sound funny later, Colbert says, "Speaking of obscene, anything to say to sink your chances?" And says that the crests will tend to break.
I feel it's kind of easy looking in the past if somebody had a scandal that over the amount of stuff they've said,
Yeah,
probably something will
definitely.
point to them having had a scandal.
I mean, especially if you're a politician, where it's pretty
Yeah.
much the thing you worry about every day.
So I think it's like pretty much any politician could come up with some sort of ironic thing they used to
Yeah.
say.
I know that after Me Too broke, John Oliver had a whole bit of like clips that really don't age well in the new context.
So I think A, that might be just like kind of it's hard to truly hide what kind of person you are, but also it's like you just say a lot of stuff and it can be
Yeah.
recontextualized.
Spitzer says that when he goes to Wall Street, he'll turn on the light and all of like the roaches will scatter.
Mm.
Then Colbert calls him out and says like, "Were you like a snitch when you were a kid?" And he says, "When I played soccer, I wasn't that good, but I was the enforcer, so I
Yeah,
could
he
take
said he
people
just
out."
played rough and didn't get caught, which is again funny
Yeah.
given the scandal.
And he talks about the role of local government, and Colbert says that it's to stop gay marriage, because imagine that was a lot of the lawsuits at the
Yeah.
time. And then he says that's maybe for a tiny portion of the country. And then Colbert says, "You mean the heartland?" Well, here in the blue states, the role of local government is different.
Yeah.
And then he asks if there's any contenders, and he says, "No, it's formally declared, but there will be candidates." I assume there were, but I doubt
Yeah.
that Spitzer would have had that much competition.
Competition. I think if I were a voter at the time, I would have been impressed with Spitzer.
Yeah, I would have been.
He seems mostly like a good candidate
Yeah,
at the time. What did he do like aside from the scandal?
I'm not
What's the
sure.
feeling on him?
Although thinking about it is interesting, I feel like there hasn't been a New York City governor that was, I mean, a New York State
State
governor
governor.
that was elected that did have to resign because Cuomo had to resign too.
So I guess Hochul
Maybe,
watch out.
yeah.
What happened to what was the guy before
So it
Spitzer?
was George Pataki.
Yeah.
I
What was
assume I'm not sure if, I mean, honestly, he might have been running again, given that I don't think New York has term limits, but
yeah. Was he was like as a Republican, was he part of like the Giuliani
Probably a little bit.
cohort.
One of the things is he did run for president in 2016, even though pretty much everybody had forgotten about him by then.
Yeah.
So and
Also,
so,
his
like,
name probably sounds too similar to Pawlenty too.
what do you
The
mean?
like Minnesota governor.
Oh, Tim Pawlenty.
Yeah.
I mean, I know he was like the joke, and like pretty much Colbert will mention him a lot. Like, say,
Yeah.
I know like later on somebody does a poll of like saying that Death would be a good candidate for president, and then he says Tim Pawlenty should be his running mate because he brings the touch of death to any campaign. Yeah, and so
uh,
the closing bit is
Rock'em Sock'em.
yeah, he has some Rock'em Sock'em robots in his studio. I knew that they were there, but I guess this is the reason why.
Yeah.
And so he says it's to commemorate the 5th anniversary of the 2000 election.
One of the greatest fights in
Yeah, it was a
American
decisive
history.
victory in that someone eventually decided. And of course, like the Daily Show's name for it was Indecision 2000, like instead of Decision 2000.
Yeah.
And I know, like they're saying we didn't realize when we picked this name that they actually wouldn't have been able to decide. One red robot, one blue robot. Says, but they are both robots deep down. Will
Yeah.
this bring them together? I hope not, because I mean it's good for TV. Is basically that. They don't make kiss 'em hug 'em robots. Not even the
No.
Jagoffs at Hasbro will do that.
Yeah. I thought this was a good bit. It
Yeah,
was funny.
I guess these ending segments will always be kind of
They're kind of like
yeah.
that.
Seems like it's mostly settled into the current format of the interview scheduling, although
Yeah.
they probably will change it around a little bit.
Yeah. I thought this was overall a good
Yeah,
episode.
this is a long recording, I'm pretty sure, but
Yeah.
that's fine.
All right.
Signing
Signing
off.
off.